works. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today I want to talk to you about cannabis and training because some of you asked about this in the comments. So I took a look around and saw what other people were saying about it, and basically you had two different camps, really. Camp number one was your standard medical profession that just sat there and said, drugs are bad, they're very bad, they can do no good for you, and if you do them, you're evil, which kind of really wasn't very helpful. So the other camp, though, was equally not helpful, and that was the people that for years have been like, ladies and gentlemen, in the beginning, they were just people, and they lived in a sorry state. And then God brought forth marijuana into the world, giving us all kinds of wonderful hemp products, giving us all kinds of the ability to be high, and therefore be happy. And everybody would just be happier and brighter and walk on water, and there would be world peace if everybody just smoked pot, which also wasn't very helpful either. So I decided to look at some of the studies and see if anybody actually did any kind of research on this. And unfortunately, there isn't much out there, so there really isn't much to talk about, believe it or not. One, it didn't seem to increase strength very much. In fact, if anything, marijuana tended to lower the amount of strength output you had in the gym. Two, it didn't seem to increase endurance in any study that I saw, and there weren't very many studies out there, so maybe there's going to be something else, but for right now, there really doesn't seem to be very much. The only positive result that they really saw in exercise, for the most part, was some people had a decreased incidence of exercise-induced asthma. So for some reason, it seemed to act like a bronchodilator when there was no real expectation of that happening in the very, very beginning. So then you might ask yourself, well, why do people actually want to smoke pot and go to the gym? Well, that's a whole different story. But the group that seems to benefit the most from it mentally in terms of exercise would be runners. Because apparently cannabis, marijuana, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't do well for learning complex activities. So for example, let's say that you don't smoke very much or you don't do this stuff very much at all, and you have to learn a whole new task, and you have to be stoned while you're doing it. You're likely to learn it slower and maybe not as well. Now, obviously, if you're somebody who's a frequent habitual user, these things change because you're used to it, you're used to functioning at that level. But if you're not, it doesn't benefit you when it comes to learning to try to do this. So going to the gym and learning a complex new activity or some kind of sport activity may not work quite as well if you're getting stoned a lot. But the group it does seem to work the most for is runners. And what you'll do if you see people in these articles, anecdotally they'll talk about running, especially long distance runners, marathon runners, ultra marathon runners, where if they smoke before they go, they believe anyway that they get a better effect. And part of the reason for that could be because there has been some studies that show that you get an increased endorphin reaction from smoking marijuana, similar to a runner's high. So in theory, I guess they would get a more intense runner's high, or maybe the onset of it would be quicker, which obviously would benefit long-term repetitive tasks or long-term repetitive exercises that create that kind of state, that kind of flow state. Again, maybe not so great if you're like, say, trying to power lift, but maybe pretty good if you're trying to like run 12 or 14 miles. Now the biggest thing, and we can't really cast too much aspersion on this, but one of the biggest benefits for a lot of people is the fact that if you have a lot of social anxiety or a lot of anxiety in general, and that inhibits your activities, if you take something like cannabis and it makes you feel better, your performance is increasing because now you're doing things that you wouldn't normally do. The brain is a weird thing, and in case you forget, the brain is that gray matter that's encased in bone about 3 feet above our asses that most people don't seem to use very often. But anyway, sometimes for some reason that gives us a lot of anxiety. And when you have a lot of anxiety, it becomes very hard to do things. You don't want to go to the gym. You don't want to do things you need to do. And some people function very well by taking some kind of anti-anxiety, of which marijuana is considered to be one of them. Now, you probably get the same result if you took a Valium or a Xanax. You're just self-medicating with a certain kind of herb, which is fine. So I'm not judging here, but if it's the only way you can do something, or the only way you can function is with some kind of anti-anxiety, and the only thing you really have access to is some kind of plant like that, well, then that's what most people are going to do. At this point, I'd like to just add this little disclaimer in here that not only am I not a healthcare professional, but I've never pretended to be one, and you should take anything I say with a grain of salt. And in fact, you should listen to nothing that I say on YouTube, because you should listen to no YouTuber without doing your own research or talking to a credited physician. I think that covers all our bases with that. All right, so going back to it and reviewing a little bit, it's the mental aspect of cannabis use that might be useful for some people, especially if you have some kind of anxiety disorder, or you think you have some kind of anxiety disorder, and it's hard for you to function without some kind of anti-anxiety. Let's see how many times I can say anxiety. or you do some kind of real repetitive activity like running or biking, which might benefit from an altered state that doesn't require you to be super alert either. Okay, so I'm trying to think if there's anything else I kind of missed. Now, I did talk to some people that have done this kind of stuff and then gone to the gym, and the one that I know of the most in my experience, does it the most, does have a great deal of social anxiety and probably wouldn't be going to the gym unless he had that kind of stuff. And as was pointed out to me, there's different strains of cannabis, and it seems like the one that gives you the most energy is the one with the sativa strain. So the greater percentage of sativa in it, the more likely you'd already be energized for training. Apparently the other one is the indica strain, I guess. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit uninformed about this stuff, but the indica strain seems to be more sedating, where the sativa strain seems to give you a lot more energy. So the people that have used it have told me, oh my God, James, there's a big difference between the sativa and the indica strain. And make sure you get the sativa strain, because that's what's going to actually make it better if you were to choose to use something like this. And again, I'm assuming that everybody knows the laws of their country, their state, their municipality, or whatever, and would fall within those laws with everything they wanted to do. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I have, and no, I really have to go. No, thank you. I will talk to you at the next video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.